Nations Resident Coordinator, Mrs. Natu and Mrs. Bugakon, Permanent Secretaries of the Ministry of Environment, Solid Waste Management and Climate Change, Mrs. Sarita Mihilal, Officer in Charge, Department of Climate Change, international and national experts recruited under the BWAR project, representatives of ministries, parastatal bodies, private sector and NGOs, members of the press, all protocol observed, ladies and gentlemen. A very good morning to all of you. On behalf of the Ministry of Environment, Solid Waste Management and Climate Change, I extend a very warm welcome to all of you to the validation workshop for the first biennial update report for the Republic of Mauritius, for short BWAR-1. I also wish to extend a warm welcome to our national and international consultants. Due to this pandemic situation and travel restrictions, representatives from the Rodrigues Regional Assembly could not be with us physically. However, they will join us remotely, and I would like to welcome them as well. As you are aware, in line with the decisions of the 17th meeting of the Conference of Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, held in Durban in 2011, developing countries, consistent with their capabilities and their level of support provided for reporting, have to prepare and submit the biennial update report every 2 years. These developed countries and small island developing states are required to submit their biennial update reports at their own discretion while focusing on greenhouse gas emissions and mitigation actions, among others. Along this line, Mauritius has received the support of the Global Environment Facility through the United Nations Environment Programme, to whom we are very grateful and thankful. Today, we are here to validate the content of the first BWAR, which is expected to be submitted to the Secretariat of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Our first BWAR is an update to the most recently submitted national communication, taking into account development priorities, objectives, capacities, and national circumstances. It is recalled that the most recently submitted national communication for Mauritius is the third national communication submitted in January 2017. The first BWAR covers emissions of greenhouse gas for the period 2014 to 2016, with a review of the greenhouse gas emissions reported in the third national communication for the period 2000 to 2013. You will recall that BWAR process started back in 2017, and the first insertion meeting was held in February 2018. Today, nearly after 3 years, we have reached the before loss milestone, that is, the validation of the content of the BWAR. Ladies and gentlemen, the first biennial update report covers the following. First, a national inventory of greenhouse gas emissions for sectors, namely energy, transport, industrial processes and product use, agriculture, forestry and other land use, as well as the waste sector. Second, an updated report on the national circumstances. Third, mitigation actions and their effects. Fourth, domestic measurement, reporting and verification, and all. Fifth, constraints and gaps and related financial, technical, and capacity needs, including support needed and received. And sixth, level of support received to enable the preparation and submission of this first report. Over these 2 days workshop, you will have the opportunity to go through these different chapters which have been prepared with your valuable inputs and helping to finalize same. Ladies and gentlemen, the United Nations Resident Coordinator has been playing a very important role in the strengthening of institutions and helping to bring advancement in various sectors in Mauritius. She has been with us in good and most importantly difficult moments such as Wakashu. Without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to invite Her Excellency Mrs. Christine Umutoni, United Nations Resident Coordinator, to address you.
Good morning to you all. It is indeed my pleasure to be among you this morning for the opening ceremony of this validation workshop of the first of the biannual update report on Mauritius. As has already been mentioned, Mauritius is a party to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and therefore what is happening today is a requirement under Article 12 of the Convention. It is therefore my pleasure to see that Mauritius is following the UN protocols as is provided. The Ministry of Environment, Solid Waste Management and Climate Change has been working with the UN, actually with a number of UN agencies. For me, I come in as a resident coordinator, and I make sure that all the agencies that are involved are well coordinated and that there is advocacy and coordination of work. But really, UNEP, particularly for this particular workshop, has provided some funds through the GEF. And we also know that other agencies, UNDP, FAO, ILO, UNODC, WHO, to mention a few, are all working in these areas because actually these are cross-cutting areas and many agencies are concerned. I understand that from whatever the review is, there is lots of observation that most of the emissions are from the energy sector, transport, water sector, and agriculture. And indeed, these are some of the areas where certain specific agencies are working and can continue to work to see how to improve the situation. It is important that we are looking at this report. 2 weeks ago, at the time when 2 weeks ago we were at Glasgow, with nearly 200 countries in Scotland at COP26, looking at these matters. In fact, there was an outcome document that was adopted, which was called the Climate Pact, that reaffirms the goal of the 2015 Paris Agreement to pursue efforts to limit the global average temperatures increase, to limit it to 1.5 degrees Celsius above industrial levels, and recognizes that achieving this goal, meaning reducing global carbon dioxide emissions by 45% in 2030 relative to the 2010 levels and to the net zero around mid-century. So these are very, very heavy commitments. And we all know that at Glasgow there were so many discussions. In fact, some people almost thought it was not going to bear much fruit, but there was a lot of negotiations, part of which the government of Mauritius was to advocate. In the end, the Secretary General of the UN still thinks the discussions, really reflected interests, contradictions, political statements, and, it was at some point very tough. Nevertheless, the pact is a very important step that was taken. COP was a very important meeting. And I'm pleased to note that under the leadership of the Honorable Minister for Environment, Climate Change, Solid Waste Management, Mauritius is keeping up to the momentum of COP26 and is continuing its efforts not only abide by its commitments under the Paris Agreement, but also accelerate its climate action. This validation workshop today, therefore, encapsulates the mindset that this country has, and especially being a small island state, it's an example that all the others should adopt. So it is really, again, my pleasure that Mauritius continues to lead by example, not only for small island states, but really for the whole of Africa. So I will not go into the details of the current state of climate change. I think we've, repeated this either before Glasgow or after Glasgow, and we know the state of affairs. But maybe a little bit to emphasize that for small island states, or maybe the fact that climate change knows no bounds and will affect all countries. But it is well known that small developing states are among the most affected. Therefore, part of our advocacy is to continue to advocate for the seas. We know that sometimes it's difficult to mobilize resources, especially for countries that have been categorized high income, like Mauritius and Seychelles and others like that. But we feel that these kinds of situations, especially impact of climate change, should be among the vulnerability indicators that show that you shouldn't only look at GDP if you to provide resources and support to countries. You should look at other issues. The cost of adaptation is high, the cost of mitigation is high, let alone the cost of disasters when we do get them. And I think this country has had a few of those. And so it is important that we look at other factors, other vulnerability factors for the islands that require continuous support. So it is the role of the UN and under my leadership to continue advocating, and I'm glad that Mauritius as a country itself, even at Glasgow, was leading the other group of islands to create their own voice and to keep pushing for this. So I think I should mention that I will not go into the big challenges that we see, the floods and all the challenges of climate change. I think it's well known. But I would rather commend Mauritius for the revised national determined contribution. Against all the challenges, I really want to thank the government of Mauritius for its leadership and commitment in taking the climate crisis serious. I congratulate the government for its bold, innovative, and ambitious approach in its revised nationally determined contributions to address both the drivers and the impact of climate change, namely with regards to the commitment to reducing its GHG, the greenhouse gas emissions, by 40% by 2030. That's a huge commitment. Increasing the share of renewable energy in its energy mix by 60% by 2030. This is again a big commitment, and also phasing out the use of coal before 2030. By embracing a low carbon economy pathway, Mauritius is setting an extremely good example to the whole world about how to win this fight against climate change. The revised NDC also highlights the key adoption actions that the country will need to implement it to protect its people and economy against the impact of climate change. I really welcome the use of nature-based solutions to build the resilience of the island, and we all know that this will require a lot of resources. That's why the advocacy must continue. I have already mentioned the support of the UN, and I wish to seize this opportunity to assure the Honourable Minister of the full support of the UN family in Mauritius in supporting the government and all the partners, because I know we cannot achieve any of this only by government. We need private sector, civil society, academia, everybody, the populations, the communities, and the local committees to happen. So we continue to pledge our support, both financial and technical, where possible, including human resources and experts where possible. And as you may, I have already mentioned, UNEP, UNDP, ILO, FAO, UNODC, WHO. I can think of those that are working directly on environment, but even all the others, including the Economic Commission for Africa in terms of data and information and research, and on all the others, and we will continue to rely on some of the key financing instruments like the GCF and JEF and others. I would like to conclude by also commending the participatory approach that was used in producing this report. And I understand that in the preparation of this report, some 50 institutions from the public, private sector, parastatals, academia, NGOs have been involved. If we were to win the fight against climate change, everyone has a role to play, and we should no longer consider people as beneficiaries or participants, but rather as partners and agents of change. The process for the first biennial report and its validation workshop today is a testimony of this multi-stakeholder participatory approach, and we really need to applaud this. As we all know, a process is as good as a product, because the process allows people to internalize the issues and own them, which means implementation becomes easy, reporting becomes easy, because it's fully owned by everyone. So we cannot underestimate the process of involving all participants, and the product that comes out becomes more stronger and more meaningful. We all know, I keep saying it whenever I have the microphone, that coming from the mainland Africa, sometimes I did not appreciate islands and their challenges. I think the first time I had arrived here, I witnessed the cyclone for the first time. So to me, living here and seeing the efforts that are happening here gives more hope that the people here do understand. But also, I did not understand that the concept when people say do not think about it only as a small island, but as a large ocean economy. I never understood the ocean and what is in there. I never understood there is a marine park. I knew there is a game park, and sometimes I love forests and animals. I didn't know what lies under, what the economy and how to protect it. So it seems like for islands, you have a double portion to play, and sometimes I think you meet challenges coming from elsewhere, coming to you because it comes through the ocean. So, but we really appreciate the way you handle it, the way you take the lead, And on this note, I really want to wish you a very successful validation and a very successful workshop. And I thank you for your kind attention. Thank you.
It gives me great pleasure to be in your midst for this validation workshop of this first biennial update report, commonly referred to as the BUR of the Republic of Mauritius. At the very outset, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to the consultants from the BA International who has worked on this biennial update report, as well as the local consultants who have contributed on specific components of the report. I also wish to express my heartfelt appreciation to the Global Environment Facility and the United Nations Environment Programme for their financial and technical support for this project. I understand that financial assistance to the tune of 352,000 USD was extended to Mauritius for the preparation of the BUR. Ladies and gentlemen, you will recall that Mauritius, as a party to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, is required to report on measures undertaken at national level to implement relevant international obligations and decisions pertaining to climate change. Mauritius has to submit its first biennial update report, which is an update to the most recently submitted national communication, while taking into account development priorities, objectives, capacities, and national circumstances. Ladies and gentlemen, you will all concur that this year has been particularly challenging on many fronts. On one hand, the COVID-19 pandemic has caused tremendous pressure on the global economy and the well-being of people around the globe. On the other hand, climate change has kept on worsening at a threatening rate. Year 2021 has been particularly challenging with a significant number of climate-related disasters worldwide. We have witnessed countless devastating events such as flooding, heat waves, forest fires, Category 5 storms, accelerated melting of the ice cover, and even local swarms infestations, which are all together testimony of the aggravating trend of climate change. The world has already warmed by 1.1 degrees Celsius since industrialization. The atmospheric concentration of carbon dioxide, the biggest driver of this heating, has reached beyond 417 parts per million. That's the highest in the modern world record from the past 125,000 years. Year 2021 is now expected to qualify among the hottest 7 years in history, according to an early estimate by the UN World Meteorological Organization that was released in October. These assumptions have been confirmed by the latest IPCC report, which was released in August. It indicated that the world will probably reach the 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold within just the next decade. At the moment, we are on the path for a 2.7 degrees Celsius warming by the end of this century. The report painted a distressing picture of how climate change will fundamentally reshape life on Earth in the coming decades and was a reality check. It has been cited as being a code red for humanity. Ladies and gentlemen, it is against this background that the international community had converged at the COP26 in Glasgow last month to discuss fundamental and crucial issues to bring the climate negotiation process forward. I had the honor to lead the delegation at the second part of the high-level segment of this historic conference. Even if the expectations have only been partly met. Significant progress has been made on very pertinent issues. The most notable achievement of the Glasgow Climate Pact is the finalization of the Paris Rulebook with agreement on transparency particularly. Now we have a clear and agreed set of guidelines and modalities for the implementation of the Paris Agreement. This aspect is very relevant to the issue we are discussing here today. The new rules on transparency mean that each country party to the Convention will now have to report emissions and progress every 2 years in order to have a clearer picture on whether nations are living up to their climate promises, particularly in terms of greenhouse gas emissions reduction. The enhanced transparency mechanism has evolved into a more comprehensive measurement, reporting and verification framework, also referred to as MOF. This enhanced mechanism is expected to build mutual trust and confidence and provide effective implementation of climate actions at country level. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish to reiterate the commitment of Mauritius to contribute its fair share to the global efforts for combating climate change, despite our relatively insignificant contribution of around 0.01% to the global greenhouse gas emissions. You will recall that Mauritius has taken some bold commitments to improve its ambitions for greenhouse gas emissions reduction. As you are aware, our updated NDC has now set the objectives for Mauritius to achieve 40% greenhouse gas emission reduction by 2030. We are aiming to increase the share of renewable energy in our energy mix to 60% by 2030, and we are now going to embark on the implementation phase of our updated NDC. In this vein, we are also implementing the recently promulgated Climate Change Act of 2020, which entered into force in April 2021. This strategic piece of legislation makes provision at Section 8.2J for the Department of Climate Change to prepare, in collaboration with relevant stakeholders, the National Inventory Report, the Report on National Communications, and such other report as may be required to meet the obligations of Mauritius under the UNFCCC and any other instrument relating to climate change. Therefore, we are already tuned in with regard to the required legislative and institutional setup to meet the obligations under the Convention. Similarly, under the Nationally Appropriate Mitigation Action Programme, we are devising an NDC registry to set up a fully operational and permanent online MRV platform. This would provide a clear understanding of climate change actions taken locally and help to track progress on greenhouse gas emission reduction as well as adaptation measures. This would facilitate the process of data collection and analysis to support forthcoming reporting processes, namely the fourth national communication. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to remind you that even if adaptation remains our priority, as a small island developing state, we are putting considerable efforts and resources to support the mitigation measures. For instance, we are promoting renewable energy technologies such as solar water heaters and photovoltaic. Government has also developed a roadmap on electric vehicles as well as strategy to support a new circular economy paradigm in the waste sector. Similarly, we are embarking on the development of a long-term mitigation and adaptation strategies in 4 key sectors, namely energy, transport, agriculture, and tourism, under Facilité 25 program with the assistance of French government. Ladies and gentlemen, I reckon that the preparation of the BUR1 has been a multi-stakeholder participatory approach, whereby some 50 institutions from the public, private sector, parastatal bodies, academia, and NGOs have been involved. In this respect, I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to all our stakeholders for their active contribution to the process. I understand that some 80 participants have been empowered under the project through 9 capacity building sessions held in thematic areas, namely greenhouse gas inventory, mitigation and measurement, reporting and verification. We still have a long way to go to achieve the targets set in our NDC. We will need the full support of all of you to achieve these goals and targets. The fight against climate change can only be won through collective efforts. On these words, I declare the workshop open, and I wish you all fruitful deliberations. With these words, I thank you for your kind attention. Thank you.